Now you're starting to try the steps, but do your intrusive thoughts just go away like that? Most of the times, no, because there are a lot of emotions involved here. And the top three things that we'll be speaking about here today is guilt, doubt, and urgency. Now, what happens is suddenly, the guilt of having such a thought comes to your mind, or you've been consciously working on your intrusive thoughts, and suddenly one day your false comfort, worried voice, wise mind, everything is speaking, and you know you're in that loop again. Now, sense of guilt might come back to you saying, okay, maybe I'm really a bad person, that things are not working for me. And this guilt is probably what's stopping you from continuing the process. Next, we have doubt. That is, you keep checking if the steps that you're taking is actually working on your intrusive thoughts. Now, the step, let's take the step, accept and believe. So, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to accept that the thought is coming to your mind. Maybe not try to push the thought back, just be there with the thought. And now you're trying to check whether acceptance is actually helping you, and you start questioning what would my false comforts would have said right now that I'm accepting the thought. And your false comfort actually pops up saying you're not a bad person, you're a nice person. Then but that's not it, right? You go back into the worry loop again. And then there is urgency. That is, you want your intrusive thoughts to go away immediately, or the moment you start the process, you want it to start working very quickly. Now that I know everything, from tomorrow, I'm not going to have any intrusive thoughts. So, that is the belief that most of us start with, which is going to make the process even more difficult. Now, there are also certain techniques which will help us follow these steps and which will help us overcome our intrusive thoughts better. Now, the first thing here is staying uncomfortable. Now, how do you stay uncomfortable? Now, in this summer, maybe putting a blanket on myself, putting a very thick leather jacket is also staying uncomfortable. But we are here talking about staying uncomfortable with your thoughts. Now, remember how we discussed about the amygdala? Now, you can't tell your amygdala that these are intrusive thoughts, so you need to learn to regulate them better, because amygdala is a system which processes on a different set of pathways. So, what you have to do is when you put yourself in the situation and give a new response, which is what we'll be talking about emotional processing, you're going to give your amygdala new ways, or through inhibitory learning, you're going to be giving new ways for the amygdala to handle. Now, what happens in emotional processing exactly is that you have a fearful experience, and to change that, you make a corrective behavior. So, when an intrusive thought comes, instead of going into the worry cycle, you go into rather telling yourself that this is just a thought. And that is how emotional processing will help you correct the process that the amygdala has always followed. And it also keeps in check with the triggering thoughts that are happening. Now, with inhibitory learning, what happens here is, so emotional processing is about more of changing the way you respond, but inhibitory learning is about learning newer pathways which can be used more frequently than the pathway that is usually used by you, which is the worried voice, false comfort. We have a new way instead, that is flow, accepting, and proceeding with your work. Now, to give an example for inhibitory learning, uh, I think all of us know that we can write both with a pencil and with a pen. So once we started writing with a pencil, we all know that that was the only thing. As kids, pencil was the only thing we were allowed to take to school, so we were writing with it. And then came pen. And we all know, since we have started using pen, we do not use pencil as much unless we have to draw a diagram, draw tables, or something like that. Now, here, the pathway of writing, which is using pencil, is not entirely away from our life at all. We are using it in some situation, or we want to scribble something down, quick notes or something, we still use our pencil. But we have found a better pathway to keep our written records more permanent, that is using the pen. Similarly, when we are practicing inhibitory learning, one thing that we have to be careful about is, despite practicing the new pathways or despite learning to tackle with your intrusive thoughts, you might still get into the loop once again. But that should not be stopping you from thinking, or make you start thinking that this is not going to work, or there's something wrong with yourself, or there's something wrong with your mind, etc. The next thing that we have is practicing. Remember how we spoke about getting uncomfortable, putting ourselves in the situation, that is, forcing ourselves to think about that intrusive thoughts. Now, planned practice is when you actually get the intrusive thought to your mind. So you know a certain set of intrusive thoughts that keep coming to your mind. Now, let's say most of the intrusive thoughts that I get to my mind are nonsensical. That is, if I do not write 5, 10 times or something, or if I see some numbers on a board, something wrong is going to happen to me, or I'm going to jump in front of the car which has this particular number. So this is again very nonsensical. Like, why would I jump in front of a car, and where would I find a car with a particular number? So I bring this thought of jumping in front of a car in a busy road and then try to practice staying with it. Incidental practice is when I'm trying to cross the road and suddenly a lot of cars are coming and the thought comes to my mind. So if a car with the number 1234 comes in front of you, jump. Now, this is incidental because the thought is something that is coming without you getting it, or without you consciously making an effort to think about it. And then you try to stay with the feeling, accept that, okay, just because my mind tells me to jump, I do not have to. It is just a thought. And look on both sides of the road, look at the traffic light, and cross the road. So these are certain techniques that is going to help us in the process of overcoming our intrusive thoughts.